Today, we're going to turn up the volume with someone who proves that adulting doesn't have to be a grind. Lauren Aumond was the creator and host of the Adulting Easy podcast. She's a real estate investor who built an awesome portfolio, became a millionaire by age 31, and walked away from the corporate grind at the age of 33. She now spends her days helping other people bridge the gap between learning about money and actually how to take action with their finances. From stock investing to short-term rentals, Lauren is proof that financial independence is within reach for all of us. Welcome to the show. How you doing, Lauren?
I'm doing great, Chris. Thanks for having me. And I couldn't have said any of that better myself. So thank you.
Right on. So you and I, we met, gosh, I don't know, like I was looking through back some emails. 2021, 2022, somewhere around there.
Yeah, it's been years now.
And I know that we had talked about short-term rental stuff. We met because I think on the Twitters back in the day, because we were both doing real estate stuff. And then we met in person at like FinCon and those type of events. So I want, for my listeners, I think it'd be really cool to kind of hear a little bit of your journey. Like why did you get into personal finance? Why did you want to leave corporate America by the age of 33?
Well, I don't know that was the goal when everything started. I graduated college in 2012, which is a rough time. And I started my first job, which I believe we shared this, where my first job was at Toys R Us. I think you also ran those Toys R Us streets back in the day. So I became like the front end department supervisor of a Toys R Us in my hometown of St. Petersburg, Florida. And it was like not fun times, graduating with a 394 in finance to working as like basically a glorified cashier. Although I was managing people at 22, which was kind of cool. But one thing that I was able to do at that time, because housing prices were so depressed, was I was able to buy a home. And I went under contract when I was 22 and I closed when I was 23. And some people at that age think I moved back in with my parents after college. I think a lot of people think I'm going to stay at home and save money, which I think is a good move generally. My brother, who was also living there, was like kind of heavy into drugs and like doing drug deals in the middle of the night. And it was really disruptive to my life and my relationship with my parents. And so I like had to like get out, and literally my mortgage payment was $725, and like to rent half of a 2-bedroom apartment with my friend was like $850 or something.
Sure.
So I just like got a roommate, and then he paid me like $550. So I was like living for less than $200, which was good because I was making I made $28,000 that year that I worked at Toys R Us that first year out of there. So, long story short, I've always been good with money. I've never been the type where like, as you have kids. I don't know if your kids are like this, but like my brother was the type where like he gets something like a gift card or whatever, and it's like, boom, we got to go to like Target. I got to buy something right now. And I'm like, put it in like a shoebox or like a suitcase and just put it away for the future. And I didn't know what the future was, but I always valued the future more than the present, even as a child. And so even though it seems like I was continuing with that idea with the home purchase, it really was like, okay, maybe I'll get some appreciation, actually get some loan pay down on this thing. But it really was just the better financial move to pay $200 a month instead of $800 a month. And so that's how it started. And then over time, I started to try to be a little more purposeful with those finances.
Right on. And I know I've heard a couple times, like on your podcast, you also had your sister on there, and you kind of were I sense that you're kind of like a mentor, or like kind of like helped guided her on some of those finance decisions. Tell me a little bit about that dynamic.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was 13 when my parents had the audacity to have a child, and I was pissed. I was like, dude, like it was me and my brother, my parents. I'm like, dude, we've been like hanging out for like, my brother was 11 years like this, and we're just gonna like throw another person into the mix. It's crazy. And it ended up being the best thing to ever happen to me, because she's like literally my best friend in the whole world.
I love
so
that.
much. I love her so much. I know people say like when you have a kid, like you really know love, but like, man, I love this kid. And maybe some wires are crossed there. I don't know. I could talk to my shrink about it. But so especially I mentioned, my brother's struggles with drugs. That started about the same time that she was born. The first time he did drugs, he was 11 years old. And so I always felt, I think, very protective of her. And I also was very curious about money and very inquisitive to my parents about money. And they would just sort of answer my questions. My sister's personality is not like that. She's not like and I think it's like the third child thing or being so much younger, but she does a lot of like observing and
Mm.
listening, but not a lot of like open questioning. And so I learned a lot from my parents because I'd be like, Dad, how much money do you make? How much was our house? What's our interest rate? Like, what's amortization? Did we pay cash for
Wow.
this car? Why didn't we pay cash for this car? Like, I remember we had to buy a new car when my sister was born because, we had like babies have so much crap. My parents, they're like, well, we have $40,000 for this car, but we're going to put that on the stock market because they're giving us 0% for 5 years. Like explaining that to me as like a 14-year-old, and me understanding that kind of stuff and being involved in those types of things. And then and once I bought the house, so I was 23, so she was like 10 or whatever, 9 probably still. And I started, change jobs, started making money, started investing in the stock market, started thinking about retirement more, and just would start as she got a little bit older, just start talking to her about things, offering things up about money and not waiting for her to ask about it. And just over time, you could tell she kind of had a knack and an understanding of money, kind of like I have, just is interested in it as a topic. Some people aren't. And some people are like really into like, say, working out. They're like, yeah, macros and reps and
Right.
personal best. And, I'm like, whatever. I go to the gym. I push some weights around and like I play tennis. I do the best I can, but I'm not like obsessed with it. I haven't read a lot of books about it like I am with money. And I could tell that she kind of had that interest as well. And now she's 22 now, which is crazy, but she's reading, all of these money books and she's just interested in it. And so it really started out. I mean, it starts out with, like I said, you have kids, but it starts out with like one day you're like getting rid of the training wheels and teaching her to tie her shoes. And then the next you're like telling her what a 401k is, that's just always been our relationship.
I think that, if you go back, it's super cool that your parents were transparent with those money decisions or, how much they spent on things. We were actually talking about that pretty deeply last weekend at Camp Fi Midwest. And there was a breakout session all talking about how to gamify money for kids, younger kids. But then the question or the conversation quickly went, well, at what age, how transparent are you? Do you tell the kids how much you make and how much you spend and that type of thing? So I think it's cool because I think that kind of helped you, especially in the long run, right?
Yeah. And they were always answered honestly, except one time I asked my dad, like, hey, if I was ever kidnapped, because I'm also really into true crime, I was like, if I was ever kidnapped, like, how much money could you come up with? And he's like 50. I was like 50,000. He was like, no, like $50. So I don't think he was honest about that. But for the most part, a lot of just radical, my family, like as you get older, you realize you have like values as a family and
Right.
honesty and I mean, we're not like the nicest people, but we're not gonna lie or cheat or steal or and that's, I just think, part of it. They just, if they're gonna, if you as a little kid get the confidence to ask the question, they are going to honor that by answering it honestly.
Right on. Right on. What do you think that I don't want to say, well, it's almost like you have this like sibling superhero energy kind of thing. I don't know.
It might be an illness, to be honest with you. It's like such a big part of my identity is that I am a big sister. And I feel so bad because I don't identify as that really with my brother. We're only 2 years
Mhm.
apart. Like we grew up together. Like, sorry, bro. I don't know. Maybe he wasn't there for you enough. But yeah, I identify so much with it. And my parents have really also, if this is an illness, really fed the fire with it because like they'll call me and be like, so this is what's going on with Jenny. Like, what do you think we should do? And I'm like, well, I think you should like parent your way out of it. Like, and they'll be like, hey, like even with like taking her to college, they were like, oh, so this is when I was still working. They're like, hey, can you get off work on this day and take her to college orientation? And I went and did that with her. And I'm like, and they were trying to give me student IDs and stuff. And I'm like, it was just like, like so my parents have really made me like the third parenting wheel for better or for worse. I mean, I think my sister would tell you it's like the bomb, like it's worked out because she's
Cool.
very, very open with me. And she's told me stuff that I for sure haven't told my parents, and my parents know that, but that's what I'm here for,
Right on. If you, again, so early on, you started investing and hitting a millionaire, right? Net worth by the time you're 31. That's a pretty big deal. What was that aha moment like? Hey, I'm doing the right thing, or tell me a little bit about that. Cause that's, I had no clue how money worked until I was like 38 years old.
Well, so it started accidental. I mean, when you buy a home in 2012, you're gonna luck into some worth, basically, right? I mean,
Sure.
especially St. Petersburg, Florida. I mean, it's turned around, really blown up over the years. So when I was mid 20s, well, even earlier than that, I spent 1 year at Toys R Us, and then I switched. I went to a new company and I did accounting for a year. And at the end of that year, I sort of felt like, okay, I got this, I understand this, but it's not like my thing. I never loved accounting. I didn't major in accounting. I actually switched from accounting to finance because I didn't like accounting. And here I was doing accounting. And a year into that, they opened up an inside sales job. And I just was like, yo, I'll do that. And I was really good at sales, got promoted a couple times. But so by the time I'm mid 20s, I'm making like 100 grand, have like $100,000 of equity probably in my house. And I'm contributing. My dad told me, like at least contribute of what they say with the 401ks, contribute up to the match. They only contributed 10% of what I put in.
Hmm.
And so I didn't do 10% right away. I did like 5%. And then my dad was like, you should also do a Roth. And so like I added like a Roth. I think you had to put in Vanguard at the time, I think you had to do like 3,000 or something to start
Yeah,
it.
there
And
was
so
like,
so I started, so I was doing like maybe 5% into my 401k. And so the company would have been matching 0.5%. And then I was doing Roths. And then after a couple of years, I started maxing both because I really started doing good sales. And I started maxing both the 401k and my Roth. And then there was like some additional money that was just like not piling up because it was like maybe like 40 grand or something. And I was like, okay, now what do I do with this? Like, everything I learn about, like, I always figured, I remember having this thought when I was like 22. I'm like, 22-year-old Lauren, also responsible for 62-year-old Lauren, 23-year-old Lauren, responsible for 63-year-old Lauren.
so amazing to me because it's so hard for kids to think about their future self. It's so hard. Like delayed gratification is so hard, at least from what I've seen. Like my kids, it's hard for them to think past next Tuesday,
Well, that's normal. I'm the weird one, but yeah, I mean, my future self, it has always been me. It's not like some ethereal, weird neighbor acquaintance person. Like I have always felt so much for that future person. And I was thinking about that today. I was like, I'm 35. I'm like, good job, 25-year-old Lauren. Thank you. And I used to think like, I better be happy with myself. But so anyways, so mid 20s, I did like a net worth calculation or something. And I was like, dang, like this was pretty good without like trying super hard. You know what I like? I mean,
Mhm.
buying a house was like kind of hard, but I had like 10 grand from, I had like 3 store credit cards, one of them being Sears, which dates me. I had a credit card that I used for the 4 years of college. They counted my school as my work history, and I made $28,000 a year, and they like freaking let me buy a house. It was crazy. Like I was like, all right,
Wow.
whatever. So I mean, it sounds like, oh wow, but I didn't have anything, and so and then my dad just
Do you remember what house cost you?
125.
125. Okay.
3-bedroom, 2-bath, 1-car garage, block home, 1957, St. Petersburg, Florida. 400 grand now. Like
Right?
easily,
Man.
easily. So anyways, I was sort of doing it, but I also wasn't doing anything crazy. Like I was just living in a house, just like had a job, I had a car. Like I was just living my life, not thinking too much about money, just like doing what my dad told me, sort of. And then I started with this extra, did the net worth calculation, had this extra money, and then started really thinking like, what should I do with this? And it did not cross my mind to do like a brokerage account. It was like, buy another house. You know what I mean? And so I was like, all right, I'm going to sell my first house and buy my second house, do like the normal thing. And then my parents had one rental property for like 40 years. And they were like, you should keep your first house and make that your one rental property and have that one rental property for like the rest of your life. And so that was the path I ended up taking. But it was all sort of accidental until then. Then I started like reading the books, listening to the podcast, really getting into personal finance, that was when I was 27.
Right on. So tell us a little bit about your current real estate portfolio. I know you and I have talked in the past about short-term rentals that you have, but tell us a little bit about what type of properties you have and what your portfolio looks like today.
So today we made a pretty big investment in a primary residence after many years of house hacking. And house hacking is when there's a lot of definitions to it, but how I think of it is when you live in a property and you rent part of it out to either get rid of your mortgage or, help pay your bills. So we did that for many years. So we made a very big investment and we own it. It's a $1 million home. We own it outright. So a lot of our real estate money is there right now. But so currently we have a 3-unit, a duplex, and a 6-unit apartment building. And so that's 5, 6, 7 short-term rentals and 4 long-term rentals. So 11 units right now.
Okay. And your long-term rentals, those are like annual leases type of thing?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Do you feel as though, I know you and I have talked about this in the past, your short-term rentals are in like what area of the country?
We have a couple in Pinellas County, Florida. They were part of like a bed and breakfast. And so we have like special zoning there, which is nice. And then we have in our 6-unit apartment building, it's called Big Bend, like the armpit of Florida. And that's where our 6-unit is. We have 5 short-term rentals there and 1 long-term tenant who, God bless his soul, hangs out with the vacationing guests all the time.
Sure,
He keeps an eye on
sure.
it for me.
Right on. Do you think that what's like a wild, you got to have some pretty wild stories. Like what's a wild like short-term rental story?
Oh man, like do you want your listeners to buy one or not? Like how hard do I go?
Touche. No,
Um,
I'm just curious because
well, it's
you know
funny.
it's not always sunshine and rainbows. We get that.
Oh God, almost never. We went to short-term rentals very hardcore after the pandemic because we got a squatter in one of our long-term rentals, and there was the moratorium on evictions, and I was like, cool, it'd be cool if you could just freaking go over there and tell them to leave and change the locks right in their face, which you could do with short-term rentals if they overstay. So because of like tenant laws and stuff. So that's one of the reasons I went to short-term rentals was I wanted, well, there were a lot of reasons. I wanted to have beautiful properties that I could be proud of, where you are truly incentivized to paint, to furnish, to decorate, and to just keep them nice. With long-term rentals, it's like, if you can't raise the rent, you shouldn't do the thing to the property. And that's just not the case for short-term rentals. So I like that part of it. I like that, like, you can't really have a squatter. And the personal use aspect and all that. Okay, you can't really have a squatter, but we sort of did. We had a duplex on the water in Hudson, Florida, which we sold last year, the month before it flooded. But anyways, so at this property, when we bought it, there were not a lot of short-term rentals around it. And over time, we bought it in 2021, over like 2022, 2023, it just really got to be saturated. And so even though our property was like really beautiful and we had the 2 units, I mean, we were still making money on it, but not as much. The average daily rate had really gone down a lot, and so that's why we sold it. But during that time frame, it's not a nice area. Like, sorry if there's anybody in Pasco County, Florida, but it's just like I think there's a lot of drugs. You know what I mean? Like, it's just north of Pinellas County, which is like where St. Pete and Clearwater are. And like, I think it's probably in the path of progress. We were just maybe 10 years too early for it. And my brother lives in Pasco, so no offense to everybody up there. But anyways, so we had this lady and she booked, and then halfway through her stay, Airbnb cancels her reservation while she's in there. I'm like, thanks a lot, Airbnb, for that. And like, she was like, okay, like they said it was my credit card. Let me get a different credit card. I think she probably used a credit card that she had stolen, and they figured that out.
Ugh.
She's like, I have a job interview tomorrow. Can I just stay through tonight and then I'll pack up and I'll go to this job interview? I'm like, yeah, no problem. Really, I just didn't want to go over there at that moment. And I was like, fine, stay the night, whatever. Which probably some people would be like, wow, that's crazy that you just let this person do that. But I just didn't feel like going over there. And the next day, like, she's still telling me, okay, the now the interview moved and this and that, and I'll be out by this time. And I'm like, okay, cool. And I'm like playing along like I believe her. And then like me and my husband get in the car and we head over there, and we just knock on the door and she doesn't answer. And so I just open the door, and she's like standing there, like right there in the kitchen with her headphones on, looking at me. And I just went and sat on the couch, because this is my house. And I was just like, so like, I don't know like what's going on with you, but like you don't have a right to be here anymore. I don't know what that, like, maybe that's between you and Airbnb, but like at the end of the day, the way my insurance and everything works is like, you can't be here. We no longer have an agreement for you to be here. And she acts, like she's calling her lawyer. All these people always say they have a lawyer. Do you know what I mean? But like, they don't. But like, so whatever. And I'm like recording obviously the conversation, and she like pretends like she's packing, but she's not really. And then she starts kind of yelling at us, and she goes upstairs and just like shuts the door and is up there. And I'm like, all right, well, I don't know what to do now. So my husband goes up there, and they're like, he never raises his voice. You've met him. Like, he's like such a quiet guy. And he just yells, fine, we'll call the cops. I'm like, okay, so I don't know what's going on up there. So I'm like, boom, like I just call 911. I'm like, I probably should have called the non-emergency line, but like, I don't know what's happening. So I call and they're like, are you safe right now? Blah, blah, blah. Like, get outside. And I was like, no, I'm not getting outside. Like, I am not vacating this premises because this is my place. So anyway, so the cops come and they were awesome. Like, they were up there. They were yelling at her. You're like, you're not moving fast enough. Like, pack your stuff. Like, I was like, dude, I love you people. And so one cop was upstairs with her and one was downstairs with us. And, you know, and I was like, can we pack her downstairs stuff? And they're like, oh yeah, go ahead. So we're just like throwing shit. She had so much shit. Wow. I'm sorry. Maybe I'm not like us. We're like throwing stuff in bins, whatever. And she's just going so slow, blah, blah, blah. And so, you know, we pack all of our stuff, we put it outside, like down at the curb, and she finally gets out. We change the lock, thank the cops, whatever. And for like, we leave, whatever. And we could see on the cameras for like hours, she's there just sitting on her shit, just at the curb. Like, she had moved in. He would like stole a credit card, probably like had moved. Like, that was all of her. Like, I don't get me wrong, I feel for her, but you know, I have to protect my property and all of those things. And the cops were good. And it was funny afterwards. Airbnb gave her like $160 refund, which I fought and got back. And she's like, I can't believe you stole my laundry detergent. Cause I didn't throw the laundry. We were packed up her downstairs stuff. I didn't throw the laundry cause I don't know. That's not mine. I don't know what I have. Right. And I'm like, okay, but maybe it's mine. So, and she was like, well, what about my bowl? Did you pack the green bowl? You know, that wasn't your bowl. I was like, actually, I did know that was yours. I did throw that in there. You know, like it was so, that was a bummer. But like, we've hosted, I don't know how many reviews I have now, maybe like 1,000 on Airbnb. So there's a bunch of VRBO, a bunch of direct. I mean, thousands of guest groups, thousands of bookings at this point. And the stories like that are so few and far between. And you know what? Like, a lot of the bad ones are from that property and I don't have it anymore.
Got it. So, I mean, from your short-term and long-term, I'm assuming, I mean, you make more money on the short-term, correct?
By a lot. Yeah.
What do you like better as far as like management and getting the leases in place? I suppose it's a balance, huh?
Well, on a daily basis, there's probably a metaphor for this, but I can't think of it. On a daily basis, short-term rentals are harder, but long-term rentals are harder when they like show up in your face. Do you know what I mean? Like, when you actually have like a tenant turnover, or if you actually have to file an eviction, you know, then they become like a big pain in the ass for like a time period, and then they like go back to being nothing again for a while. So it's really different. I actually think that a balanced portfolio should have both. I think it's a good part of diversification. And just to give you an idea, we went to Alabama this past weekend and a couple of weeks ago to look at properties. And we looked at both short-term and long-term possibilities. If that gives you an idea, like we are open to either option at this point.
Are you going to buy some of those $3 million homes in Gulf Shores?
No, we don't need anything more near the Gulf. Let me tell you, we're trying to get away from the hurricanes, trying to diversify again with the diversification. My husband, we haven't talked about this, but he sold his engineering firm recently. And so he's like completely work optional, even with our upgraded lifestyle with the new primary residence and a lot of the lifestyle inflation that we've done since, because when I left my job, we were FI. And then my husband said, I'm going to work for lifestyle. I was like, you do that, but I'm out. Like, I did what I said I would do. And I'm 3 years older. And so now the extra 3 years that he's been working have been enough to up the lifestyle and still be able to retire early and all of that. So he's completely work optional. And so, you know, we're just trying to see where we want, you know, where do we want our money and where do we want our portfolio to be, and having just this concentration. I mean, there have been, you know, like the cone of uncertainty for hurricanes. Like there have been times where like every property I own is in that thing. And I'm like, wow, I just can't live like that anymore. Like, let me get, I mean, obviously the stock market's not in the cone of uncertainty, but you know, let me get some of this real estate money out of Florida. And so we have some very good friends in Huntsville, Alabama. So we were looking there and in some of those surrounding areas. And so that might be something that we do. But I just bring that up to say, we're not so in love with either asset class that we are like, I will never do another long-term rental, or I would never do another short-term rental. It depends on how much work and the returns and things like that.
Right on. Yeah. I still haven't, every time like you and I talk, or, I mean, I talk to some other investors. There's a lot of people that do short term and I just haven't pulled the trigger. It's again, depending on where it is, it's really hard here in Minnesota if you got to get something that is on a lake, but you got to get something on a lake that you can do it year round, right? So you got to make sure, are there trails? Can you snowshoe? Can you, ski? Can you like what can you do in the winters as well?
And you have to do it year round. Why? Because of where the purchase price is?
But yeah, I
Yeah.
would think so. I don't think you could really, unless it's a really nice place where you could just do it in the summers,
Right. Well, and
Yeah.
if you're going to cut off that much revenue, you just need to get a really good deal. I mean, we've considered some places like that. Like we love Maine, but like when we look at it, we're like, dang, like the season is so short. Like we probably should just buy somewhere more south. And that's how we've kind of ended up in like looking in Appalachia, because it's like we can drive there from here in Tampa. It's like a 10-hour drive. So you can do it in one day. It's not fun, but at least you can get there and you can have your car and your tools if you need them or whatever. And the weather's a little bit better. Like we were there and it was like 72 degrees in the morning. And I was like, I haven't seen 72 degrees in like 6 months. So the weather's a little bit better. But yeah, I mean, not every area lends itself to short-term rentals. Not every personality does it. Not every financial goal. You don't need to juice your returns by switching long-term rentals to short-term rentals, or just getting short-term rentals if that's not part of your financial plan either.
Right on. And I know that when we talked a while ago specifically about your short-term rentals, and I was kind of like all in, like, oh my gosh, I have to do this, because you were telling me all of these systems that you had in place to help automate it. Are you still using those as a lot of what you do automated? And spend just a couple minutes and talking through, if someone's thinking about it, what are some of the ways you automate that process?
Yeah, the systems are really key, and it's time for us to do probably like a full audit and see if new systems have come out. And my husband wants to do some of that, get a little more involved. I mean, with him being working full time and me being off, he hasn't been super involved, but he wants to take a look at another set of eyes on it. So looking forward to that. We're going to do that soon. But yeah, I think some of the reason I'm into short-term rentals more than long-term rentals is because I have not systematized the long-term rentals. Like when one of them has like an issue, they like text me. They don't like put in a work order. I don't like farm it out. Like I forward the text to my husband, then he goes over there and fixes the thing. Or if it's our 6-unit apartment building, my uncle, who's a handyman and lives in that county, like we call him and then he goes over there, makes 2 trips every time and then does it. So we haven't systematized that, but the short-term rentals we use a property management software that means you've got your one point of truth for your listings. And so if I update something on there and then it goes to both Airbnb and VRBO, for example, if you don't have that, then, I have friends that have just have their units on just Airbnb, but I don't know why you wouldn't just throw them on VRBO except for having to change them. But you don't have to do that when you have a property management software. You have the communications that are automated to the guests and also to the cleaners, and the cleaners have access to the calendar. And so I never have to schedule anything with cleaners. Like I just get like at like around 3 or 4 o'clock, some days I get a bunch of pictures from the cleaner, and that's how I know the unit has been cleaned and they don't miss it, because, they've got, not only do they get emails when a booking is made, changed, or canceled, they have that actual calendar that they can pull up just to double check things, make sure that, that they're on top of it. And like I said, the communications and the locks are automated too through that. We use a software along with the property management software that sets the locks 30 minutes before check-in and 30 minutes after checkout. That's how long the code works. And if a booking gets extended or moved, that the locks code, the time frame moves with them. And so that's really key. I didn't want to spend a lot of time doing that. And then all of the welcome information, parking instructions, Wi-Fi information, checkout instructions, all of those things are also automated. And so on a day-to-day basis, I mean, there are plenty of guests that I basically never communicate with. They book, the booking message asks for their email. I send them, I have put the email in the system, and then and then from there, everything is automated. So there are guests that I basically never talk to.
Wow.
And I'm like, they give me 5 stars, I give them 5 stars, and we move on.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That is really cool. Yeah. Again, like I hear that story and I'm like, man, that would be pretty rad if I get a short-term rental.
I just don't know. I wouldn't probably do all that for I didn't do it until I had my 4th and 5th listings. The first 3, I did everything myself. But I mean, you could do all of that for one.
Sure. Well, it's kind of like when my long-term rentals, I mean, I self-managed until I got 3 of them. And then I farmed all that out to, full-time property management. And then, I scaled from 3 to 10 in like 2 years
Yeah,
because
because you
the
can.
systems were in place, right? So
Yeah.
I want to switch directions a little bit because you, for a long time, so you podcast, you had a podcast. It's on a little bit of a hiatus right now, called Adulting is Easy. And I want to hear a little bit about one, why you named it Adulting is Easy. What the, I guess, the brainchild behind that. But you talked to so many people over the years. So how long have you done Adulting is Easy?
Yeah, it's still kind of hard to like talk about adulting is easy in the past, but I did it for almost 6 years. It was over 200 episodes. So like, yeah, I nobody would believe this now, but like I really hated the word adulting. Like when it first started, I was like, God, it's just so annoying. Like that's not a word. Do you know what I mean? Like adult is a word. Like we don't. That's a noun, not a verb. And again, in my like mid 20s, when I was getting into personal finance and learning these things, I would, especially at work, I would just like talk to coworkers about like, what are you doing with your 401k? What about this? What about that? Just
Mhm.
talk about personal finance. And we were selling business finance training, but April is financial literacy month. And so they asked me to write a personal finance blog for the company I work for. I was like, sweet, no problem. And I was like clickety clacking away. And then I've got like 10 pages. I'm like, okay, this is not a blog anymore. Maybe I really like this stuff. And so I just like, I saved it. I was like, maybe I'll start a blog. And I was like, well, what would I could call it? And I was like, well, money is a big part of adulting. And I mean, some people talk about adulting as like how to change a tire, how to sew a button on, how to hem some pants or make your own doctor's appointment. But I really read the adulting thing really resonated with me with money because all these things that your parents were taking care of, you suddenly have to do when you're like 22, 23, 24 years old. And before that, for the people that
Mhm.
are definitely more mature than I was. Um, and more with it and maybe with less supportive parents. I that's what resonated to me. And so I went on Twitter and I was like, adulting is easy. And it was available. And so this was 2017, I just grabbed the handle and saved those 10 pages. And that was it for like 2 years. And then in 2019, I was getting really good at my job. Like I had been at this place for like 6 years. I had been at the same job for 5. So it wasn't like challenging me as much. And I was like in therapy and I was talking to a therapist and she's like, well, like have something outside of that lights you up. I was like,
Mhm.
do I have to change jobs? Like, do I have to change careers to get like motivated? And she's like, no, like have something. And so that's when I started sort of a blog. I started writing. I don't like writing as much. And I didn't want to do like all this like SEO and like word packing. And that's not fun. Like backlinks. And that's not cool to me.
Mhm.
And I've always been told I have like a nice voice. At least it's like deeper. Some women's voices are kind of annoying. Sorry, ladies, love you. But like I was told like, okay, I have a good voice. So I was like, well, maybe podcasting is the way to go. This is before like podcasting was video. And I didn't know I was going to be on video all the time, which you can see like that's not what I'm about with my wet hair and no makeup and stuff. I didn't even put my engagement ring on. I didn't even put earrings on. Sorry, Chris. You know, so and I was like, okay, well, what would I do? And so what I did at first was would write a blog and then talk to Jenny, my sister, about it. And that went on for like 6 months or something. And then she had to like
Mm.
take SATs and be a junior in high school and IB exams and all that stuff. And so then I switched to interviewing, which I actually really liked. And being in sales for as many years as I was doing a lot of sort of interviewing because sales is just having those conversations. I mean, your initial discovery conversations, you're listening 70, 80, 90% of the time. And it's just about asking questions and getting people to talk and open up and getting not only the logical side of their brain going, but if you get to that emotional side of the brain, that's when the good stuff really comes out in sales conversations. And so, I was able to, I think, use some of the things I learned while I was selling to do a lot of interviews. And so it went from there, from like episode like 25 to over 200. It's basically all interviews with people from all these different topics. And, maybe that was a shortcoming of Adulting is Easy. It wasn't a real estate podcast. It wasn't a stock podcast. I mean, it really was personal finance based, stocks, bonds, dividends, all different kinds of real estate, house hacking, flipping, wholesaling, buying land, short-term rentals, long-term rentals. There were FI conversations in there. Just a lot of different topics that were covered in those 200 something episodes.
Sure. So with that being said, I mean, all of the guests you've had, all the discussions you've had, like, is there one or two that like really stuck with you that made you rethink something that really made an impact in in your FI journey or in your life?
It's more like one or two themes, I think, that stick out. And for a long time, I fought against this idea because I always thought that I was, I was gifted, and I was like, I'm special. They told me all my life I was special. But really, like anybody can do this stuff. Like, and I fought against that for so long. I was like, no, not anybody can be successful in real estate like me because I'm so smart and whatever. But like, that's not true. Like, you really can. Like, anybody can learn this stuff. And that's not to say like the people I spoke to are not impressive. Like, they all are impressive in their own ways, but like they're all so different. And yet they're all figuring out personal finance, and really anybody can do that. Another thing is you do have to do something. You do have to take action. You cannot, all of these people I'm talking to, they didn't just learn. They didn't just listen to podcasts. They didn't just read books. They didn't just go to networking events. They didn't just find their tribe online. They didn't just join Discords. They didn't just do that. They also are taking action in some way. And for some of them, that's doing their first real estate deal. For some people, it's signing up for their 401k for the very first time. For some people, it's paying down credit card debt, going the Dave Ramsey route if you need to, whatever the first step is. So that's the thing. It's like anybody can do it, but you have to do it. You have to take a step and get started. And then there really is like the flywheel or a snowball or an avalanche will follow you once you take those first steps. But you can't just learn. I mean, this is great, Chris. Don't get me wrong. I'm a huge fan of podcasts. People need to listen. They need this information, but they also have to take something from it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing is like you can get all the knowledge in the world, but unless you take action on that knowledge, it doesn't mean anything. Right?
And it doesn't have to be like a big thing.
Mhm.
Like, I think that's what people get really worried about. They're like, like let's say it had been a goal of mine to make $1 million by 30 or whatever, 31, which it wasn't. Like I said, it was just like, oh, we'll try this and see what happens.
Mhm.
And then you get into real estate and then you get a little mentally ill and go crazy. But yeah, it can be like I said, like making sure you're signed up in your 401k, making sure that you are investing your funds. Like sometimes funds just go into accounts and they're in the money market and they're not actually, like, it can be such little things like that. Or if you want to pay off your mortgage early, set that extra, call the mortgage company and send a couple $100 extra every month and make sure it's going to the right place. It can be like little steps like that. And then once you take them, if you automate things, you put your head down, you look back up 5 years later and your life is completely different.
Yeah. I mean, the time's going to go by anyway. So just do it. And then, yeah. So
and I think just because time has gone by and you've been thinking about doing things, like that doesn't mean you like still shouldn't do it. Just because you should have done it sooner, that doesn't mean you shouldn't do it now.
That's right. That's right. The best time was 5 years ago. The next best time is now.
Like right now. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. So before we wrap up, I know that the last time we were at, I think it was FinCon, you were trying to explain to me this true crime podcast you were listening to. So you were one of the first people that I knew that were so into what's new in the true crime world? What are people listening to now?
Oh my gosh. Well, the big thing in true crime, there's been 3 this year. One was there were 2 young girls that were killed on a hiking trail in 2017. And 5 years later, they found the guy. And then 2 years after that, which was this year, they prosecuted and convicted this guy who killed these 2 young girls. So that was incredible. I mean, something that I was following from day one. There was a quadruple homicide of students in Moscow, Idaho. And they found that killer very quickly, used some really cool DNA techniques. And he just pled guilty to life in prison and agreed to no appeals, which is awesome. So he's gone. And then the other thing is just like this crazy case out of the Boston area. This woman, Karen Reed, backed over her cop boyfriend while she was drunk and got acquitted. And so those are the big things right now. Back then, I remember it was the Murdoch case that we were talking about because it was nuts. Because whoever we were at lunch with was like, oh yeah, I live in like that county. I'm like, dude, I can't even imagine what it's like living there. Because that was a crazy case of this like lawyer that was stealing from all of he was, instead of giving them their settlements, was keeping them, which is insane. And then his son gets drunk and kills somebody in a boat accident. And in that investigation, they start looking into his finances, and then he has to kill his son to get rid of that. I mean, that's what we were talking about at the time.
Do you think, I mean, I'm not in like the true crime world and I don't really listen to many, but are they mostly like cold cases from years ago that they kind of come up to the surface because we're talking about it? I don't know. What are your thoughts?
It's a mix. It depends on the podcast. I mean, there are some
Okay.
that my favorite is the prosecutors, and they do a lot of trial type stuff and
Okay.
really dive in and really teach you about the law. And so you like, there's all these clickbait headlines in true crime where you're like, oh, I'm so outraged. And then like you listen to them and they're like, this happens this is like literally the only way this could go legally, you know? And so they focus on that. There's True Crime Garage. They do more of those, like you're talking about, unsolved, really old cases, trying to get people to talk about them. And then there's different podcasts that do like 1 hour and cover a whole case. There's some that they take 6 weeks to cover and do
Sure.
these really deep dives. So it just depends. I mean, it's like choose your own adventure, and it's ethically so different from personal finance, because in personal finance there's nothing ethically weird. I don't think. I mean, I guess there's a little bit, like some people think wealth is evil inherently,
Right.
but if you
Right.
don't think that, nobody's like, wow, I can't believe you're listening to a podcast about a 401k. Like, that's crazy. Like, you're a bad person. Versus true crime, you're like sort of entertaining yourself with the worst thing that's ever happened to these victims in their lives. But I think I've thought about this a lot. I think what draws me to it is I feel like if I were a victim, I would want people to know my name and I would want them to know my story. So I sort of feel like, it's like, you die twice, the day you die and the last time somebody says your name. And I feel like if I'm listening about these victims and hearing their names, and these podcasts that I listen to, they do a really good job of keeping them victim focused. And so that's why I do it, I think. And yes, there is some level of entertainment and not having to think too much. And, you got to do something while you're biking and driving and cleaning and all that.
Yeah, right on, right on. Well, Lauren, I want to thank you so much for your time today. Thanks for hanging out. And, I'm sure that we'll talk again in the future, but I want to thank everyone else for listening. Please like and subscribe, share with your friends, and we'll see you next time on the Extreme Personal Finance Show. See ya.